Can I just ask a question about the security of this whole thing? Where is this data? Where is this data and how secure is it? Is it physically somewhere? Is it in some great storage system in Iceland? I mean, where is this thing kept and how secure is it?
Well, it doesn't exist yet, so it doesn't belong anywhere. It's an idea at this stage as opposed to a thing. We will be consulting on some of the questions on security standards. What I've asked the team to do, though, is to make sure that it is at least equivalent to banking level security with your banking app. Some of that is about device level security, two-factor authentication, those types of things. But then we'll also have system security requirements about where the data is being held and how it interacts with other IT systems. But as I say, this is my personal view as opposed to government policy, because we've not consulted, but my personal view is I would rather that was built and held by the government with parliamentary oversight and accountability, as opposed to us kind of outsourcing it to a private company to run on our behalf.
So you would anticipate that it was geographically located in the United Kingdom, for instance?
I would assume so, but we're not at the stage to be able to answer that because we need to consult on it.
We're going to move on to some more general questions around digital ID, but just while we're still on e-visas, one of the points that was made to us in evidence was that one of the problems is that your e-visa is connected to your passport, and then your passport changes and the number changes, and because it's only a 10-year or however long it is, and you're constantly having to update your information. Are you looking to try and change that so it's not a case of having to link to a new passport every time someone gets one?
My understanding is that it would be the user's responsibility to update that, yes.
The complaint that was made to us was that this just adds a level of complexity that is unnecessary. If actually when the e-visa was issued there was a number attached to the e-visa rather than it being attached to the passport number, then the individual could prove their right to work more efficiently and effectively. So is there any possibility that
this
might
is certainly
happen?
where the benefits of consultation that we can take those views on, but of course a passport does last for 10 years, so it's only once every 10 years that would need to be done.
Well, not of course if you're under 16 and you've got one that's 5 years, etc. There are always complications, Peter.
I mean, surely you must agree that we should move to one number for one person. I mean, I come back to the NHS number. People are born with an NHS number, which could be their number, and it could also be the number on their passport, the number on their driving licence, the number on all their government documents. Why do we need a system which keeps changing the number?
Well, digital identity will, as I say, not be a logging, it will be a legal identity in its own right. I see no reason in the long term why through the app you can't just have one place where your information is, whether you choose to have access to certain services or not, and whether you therefore wish to use that legal identity to verify other engagements with government. The only expectation management I would pose is that it will probably take us quite a bit of time to get there because of where we're having to start as a government, and as I say, we are trying to catch up in relation to comparisons in Denmark and Australia and other places that have been able to make this work.
Just on the point, it's also the foreign country that issues the visa, and we link the identity for various border security reasons on their first entry to that identity document, and that's verified before they travel to the country. Therefore, if they change that document, we're able to then subsequently link it back to that original issuing document. So there are wider border security identity verification for people who are not British citizens, that we link it back to their passport.
Paul Kohler and then Joe White.
So this is that naive question, but back to Peter's point. It's not really about digital ID, this question, it's broader than that. Why don't we have a single number for everything? NHS, we've got our NHS number, we've got our passport number, we've got our NI number. Why don't we just have one number for people to interact with government? I still don't understand why we don't.
I think it's just because historically we've never had a government-issued identity in this country that is mandatory in the way that maybe other European countries do. So we've had the freedom to have a passport if we wish to have one or not, a driving licence if we've qualified or not.
Why not use your NHS number for those things if you do? Why not just say, use that number you've got?
Issued at birth.
Sure, but it's always been freedom for citizens to decide whether they wish to do it or not, as opposed to us saying that this is what you must do.
No, that doesn't explain it, because if you decide you want a passport, right, you're in it, your NHS number is used. If you decide you want to work, your NI number is used. I still don't understand why we don't use the same number.
I think Parliament would have to legislate for that, for the public to have. My hope, though, from a user experience, is that if you are logging into the gov.uk app with your digital ID, as I say, in a number of years' time, and some of these services are coming into the app, you will, in practice, just use one thing to get into the system.
I know what you're saying. So all your numbers will be, will be verified by the app. I just do not begin to understand why we don't use the same number. I don't understand the civil liberty argument that somehow you have a civil liberty to have a different number for your passport to your NHS. It seems bonkers.
I'll defend the Minister. I think it's a legacy issue here. I think you wouldn't start from here,
That's
would you?
always the answer on this. We've got to push them.
Let's start again. Yes.
Well, I mean, that's, I think, what we're asking the Minister about. But Joe White.
It's also the case,
Sorry, Mr. Hunt.
It's also the case that an NHS number is not given to non-British nationals. So you will have people who are born overseas who become British at a later date, and therefore it may not be that there is a single number that works for everyone at every stage of their life.
Yeah, I think we're diversing. This is a question for Mike. What calculations has the Home Office made on the potential of reducing fraud using digital ID?
It's difficult to quantify the exact impact in terms of numbers, but we can say absolutely this will streamline the process, make it easier for employers to check, so there won't be that accidental fraud as well, accidentally letting fraud through, and much more difficult for those who are seeking to present a dodgy passport to actually do so. So I can't give you those exact numbers, but it will certainly have an impact, yes.
So,
if I may just add, I think there's a wider benefit as well, because we know that fraud more generally is a huge issue and a huge strain on our police service, and I'm sure we've all had constituents who have lost money fraudulently online in some way, and they get pointed to action fraud where it just gets reported as a statistic. The police don't often have the capacity to get involved unless it's a huge fraud, and people are left high and dry. And this is because a lot of the time, if you're on, I don't know, Facebook Marketplace, or I shouldn't name companies, an online company who's pretending to be someone, you might get sucked into a fraudulent transaction without that company being able to say that it is you who you say you are. So digital ID, where people want to use it to verify their identity in private companies and in online spaces, in theory should be able to do that and be able to reduce wider fraud as well in the future.
Okay. So the Association of Digital Verification Professionals, they told us it's not able to effectively share intelligence on fraud with the Home Office. So how will the government make better use of intelligence generated by digital identity providers?
A lot of this depends on the audit store and the decisions that are made around that, which won't be made until after the consultation. But there's great potential there.
But it's currently mad, quite frankly, that you've got companies verifying the identity of people, and if they think there are problems, they currently don't share that information with us because we've got nowhere to put it.
Yes.
I mean, that's slightly balmy. So my hope is that we'll build a system where, whether you're verifying your identity with government or with someone else, the fact that you've been able to do that or not should come together into that audit function.
A way of feeding it in directly. Yeah, good. And so has the Home Office explored where digital ID would be beneficial in other areas?
That's a good question. I mean, there's already fantastic platforms for as you've seen your passport very recently. I think the main area will be around immigration enforcement for the Home Office and combating illegal working.
And this is a question for Darren, and it's a similar question. Are there any other services that will be you believe should be accessed by digital ID?
I think there are lots of services that we would be able to make much more easier and much more integrated into the app. If you think about your DVLA tax, getting your MOT information presented to you in one place that's due, having the paperwork in a place for that. when it comes to your driving license, when it comes to paying money to HMRC or even getting some back if you're lucky. There are lots of simple customer service issues that are absolutely capable of being put into one place. And then in time, some of the bigger, more complicated ones that should be much easier for people. I think about the childcare system a lot. The fact you've got to log into the HMRC website every 3 months, verify your employment, work out 80% of the fee, do the card payment yourself, then find your provider and then process the payment. And then you've got to get a form from the local authority, get a code, which you've got to sign with your nursery provider every quarter in order to get you funded. I mean, the whole thing is crazy. If you can just verify your eligibility for something and allow government to process a payment for you, then we should do that.
I can see you've been experiencing personal pain.
I declare my interest. Yes.
So, how is the government going to set objectives for the programme, and do you think they're realistic?
I do, insofar as, in the course of this Parliament, all that we are trying to do is get the consultation and the legislation in place to enable us to build the digital ID system and integrate it into the app to allow for digital verification of right-to-work checks. That's it for this Parliament. And we will do those things, and I think they're all feasible. For me, though, the bigger prize and the things we've just been talking about, I want to get on with as quickly as possible, but I'm probably not going to be able to get to many of those this side of the next general election. But if we can build the foundations on top of which we can modernise public services in the future, then that will be a good piece of work. And
so will the government's consultation on digital ID consider the issue of function creep?
Function, as in which functions are coming onto the app. Yeah. The consultation will ask questions on that. I'm also looking forward to working with Parliament on the legislation. Mm-hmm. My sense at this stage is I don't particularly want to present a bill to Parliament that tries to envisage all possible functions in the future and pre-legislate for them. Yeah. So I'm interested in thinking about how do you build a framework piece of legislation that enables the building of these digital foundations and says that in the future, when government wants to onboard a service, we will come back to Parliament, ideally not with a primary bill because it's too slow, but maybe a form of statutory instrument or a legislative reform order. Maybe we can work with select committees to have a proper check and balance on that and just get approval from Parliament as we onboard those services in the future so that you don't have function creep without any democratic oversight.
Maybe a model restoration and renewal could look at. Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you. I mean, just picking up on that point, Chief Secretary, clearly there was significant public opposition, I think, to mandatory elements of this, and there's mandatory, pure mandatory, or there's mandatory de facto, i.e., if you want to have a right to work check, you don't have to have a right to work check, but if you do, it has to be digital ID. So do you accept the principle that there should not be de facto mandating of any services? So it might be in the future, it might be less convenient for a citizen to do something using a non-digital ID, but ultimately they will still have that option even when government onboards future services.
I think that's right, and I think if our government or any future government wants to change that position, they ought to come back to Parliament to get approval for it, quite frankly, because it is an important thing for the public. And I think it's also a responsibility on us as we launch the consultation and talk to people about the country on this, that we explain as simply as possible what it is and what it isn't. So I think a lot of the opposition to digital ID, lots of people find the idea of digital ID quite scary or intimidating. Then there's a lot of misinformation about state surveillance and state control. It's the absolute opposite of that. What I want to try to achieve is that you get more control over your data than you do now, and more control over your data than you might do with private sector companies. So you are in control, there is transparency, you will be able to see on the app what services you're using, and if you don't want to use them, that's up to you, and what data you're sharing. And the prize is that public services that you rely on are there when you need them in an easy way in your hand and your mobile phone. So I'm hoping the consultation and the work we do over the next few months will help to deal with some of the myths that have built up about what this programme is and what it's not.
On reflection, given that prize, was the way that this was initially announced as a mandatory thing, has that risked undermining public opinion for the potential significant benefits that you outline?
I think the mistake that we made is it was announced and then there was a period of silence, and we shouldn't have left a period of silence. I think it was a reflection of a number of things. There was a major government reshuffle. We were announcing it just the week before the party conference season, and various reasons. But it would have been better to have followed up with the Prime Minister's announcement on more public engagement about things that we've been talking about today. But our job is to do that now, and to use the consultation and the legislative process to make sure that the public and Parliament is fully on board with what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah, this idea that Big Brother is watching you is something that colleagues here across all parties have a view about, but also it's something that I've had to counter in my constituency. A huge sense of fear that this is government doing things to people. And I think it's more than a consultation that you're going to have to do in order to break through that and give that people that sense that this is about them taking control over their data. How do you think you can do this and achieve this huge? For me, it's a big milestone because it's a difficulty I'm faced with my constituencies.
I think that's right. As I say, we'll be providing materials for MPs to do things in our constituencies if that's something that's useful. We'll also be doing traditional media, digital marketing campaigns, and those types of things whilst we go through this process. Because, and this is going to a slightly different part of my brief, but at the moment government's not very effective at getting its message across online for a whole host of reasons. And what we saw off the back of the Digital ID announcement was a lot of mis and disinformation that kind of scared people, and we were pretty silent about what we wanted it to be and what the benefits were. And so we have to make sure that we're doing that more effectively online as well as through those kind of traditional mechanisms.